Well, so you can see, I know he did a great job, didn't he? So this month we have Nick Tomesco and Pat Leahy. They are the ones that put this together along with your Chief Holla. He did a great job supervising the whole. Give him a hard time about supervising it. So, a couple of videos here go along with this. And I'm sorry, but yours doesn't go to widescreen.
Son, I figured when you were old enough, I'd talk to you about drugs. I'd tell you they're nothing but poison. Tell you to stay away from the garbage that pushes that junk. Only I never figured that I ought to be telling that to a 13-year-old.
If you don't teach your kids to say no to drugs, it's as good as saying yes.
Really?
Good job.
Yeah, you got figure it out.
See this cute little vial here? It's crack, rock cocaine, the most addictive form. You think it's the glamour of the early 80s? Well, that's the point of this fundamental reminder. It can kill you. And if you've got to die for something.
Edison EMS, Diamond Ambulance 21, Engine 25, 23, 23 McDaniel, set up all victims with unknown specific.
Don't forget the side
Make sure you're lined up.
Chris Foch kicked the tripod because he's so worried about his first call as a captain.
That's our call.
This sure as hell ain't it.
This is crack, rock cocaine. It isn't glamorous or cool or kid stuff. It's the most addictive kind of cocaine, and it can kill you. What's really bad is nobody knows how much it takes. So every time you use it, you risk dying. It isn't worth it. Look, everybody wants to be cool, but doing it with crack isn't just wrong. It could be dead wrong.
Are these your drugs?
But Dad, it's
Why
not
would you get it?
Dad,
Answer me. Who taught you how to do this stuff?
you, all right? I learned it by watching you.
Parents who use drugs have children who use drugs.
Is there anyone out there who still isn't clear about what doing drugs does? Okay, last time.
This is your brain. Oh, yeah.
This is your brain. This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?
I'm convinced.
Yeah, old commercials from the 80s. A lot of different types of drugs. We have many different types of classifications. Amphetamines, most commonly with the amphetamines, it's a stimulant. We see a lot of the legal stuff going around like Ritalin and Adderall. We see a lot of college a lot of college kids going ahead and taking it just to stay awake, to be able to cram for a test. We see high school girls and boys taking it as a way to lose weight. Methamphetamine, still pretty common because it's pretty cheap, easy to get, is also a stimulant. Barbiturates, not so common. People usually will use barbiturates to follow up with one of the other medications to kind of bring them back down. something to relax, maybe if they're have anxiety problems. Hallucinogenics, still pretty common. LSD, PCP are some of the older ones, but there's mushrooms that are pretty common. And there's, actually my students were just telling me the other day, and I'm trying to think of the name of it, they were talking something about LSD that gives you a little bit of a high. And then marijuana, always still a big issue with the marijuana. We just sent out, it's been about 2 weeks now, and I don't know if you guys had it. We got a packet from the U.S. Department of Justice regarding fentanyl and the carfentanil and the acetylphenylines and the different types of opiates. But some of the information in here I found to be pretty interesting. You know, they're so worried about the opiate epidemic now. My gosh, I can't talk this morning. But it's not the illegal stuff like the heroin that seems, or it's the prescription, it's not the prescription stuff that's as big a problem as the illegal stuff like the heroin. We just see a lot more people, because people are taking the opiates, the Percocets, the morphines, the fentanyl, and using that as way. Fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, 30 to 50 more times more potent than heroin, and carfentanil, which is the one that they keep warning you guys about, is about 10,000 times more potent than morphine itself. A lot of times they're seeing fentanyl be mixed with cocaine as a speedball, and then they're finding that fentanyl that is mixed with heroin, and they're calling it gray death, just because of the concentration and the look of it when it's mixed together, we're seeing. We find that just 1 kilo of fentanyl can produce about 1 million counterfeit pills, and that will provide about $20 million in revenue. And most people will prefer fentanyl over heroin because it's a much better rush than heroin itself. The thing that you guys were really worried with you guys is the carfentanil, just because of how potent it is. And it can be airborne, it can be powder form. You might pick up a phone that somebody had and it has some of the powder on it. If you do that with your bare hands, it is absorbed very rapidly through the skin, and obviously we don't know how much it is or how much is needed to go ahead and cause issues for you. They're also warning that police dogs, it's giving them a serious risk to health risk, but it will cause some type of respiratory depression. They think that if you're unsure of any substance, any powder, make sure that you are going ahead and contacting a hazmat team. Some of the things they're recommending for you guys, one of the other things they're putting it in is they're putting it in nasal sprayers and eyedroppers. So if you see nasal sprays or eyedropper bottles, kind of be aware that that could have been mixed. They're also recommending not only just the nitrile gloves. Do not use latex gloves. They found that latex gloves cannot protect you from this, but they are recommending that you use some type of dust mask, N95 mask, eye protection, and paper gown and suit and coveralls as protection for you guys if you come in contact with them. I think that's pretty much the gist of this whole packet here. Oh, I found this interesting. It only takes 2 to 3 milligrams of fentanyl to produce respiratory depression with this carfentanil, which is equivalent to about 5 to 7 individual grains of table salt. So it's not a whole lot that can start to cause harmful reactions in you guys. So something just to kind of be concerned about. I think this has been emailed to Chief Pollock. I know it has. So if you're interested in reading it, if he hasn't passed it along, go ahead and ask him for it. Heroin is still a big concern. It's cheap, it's easy to get a hold of. You know, a lot of people will be prescribed different opiates, Percocets, Vicodins, and of course their doctors take them off of it, and so they still are now somewhat addicted. So they actually turn to heroin, and it's cheaper than the pills itself. Street value of a Percocet pill, a 10 milligram, 325 Percocet, will run you about $10 a pill. So if you can get heroin, you can get a lot more heroin for $10 than you can with just one Percocet pill, which really is going to wear off in a couple hours anyway. Black tar heroin is the lower the quality, usually comes from Mexico. And they cut it with either coffee starch or brown sugar or molasses. Brown heroin is a little bit better cut of heroin. And they'll mix it with cocoa and powdered milk. And then our best quality heroin is going to be the China White, which can be mixed with powdered milk and a bunch of other things like fentanyl. It gets mixed with. We currently use Narcan to go ahead and reverse opiates. Narcan will block the opiate receptors, therefore it will not allow the person to feel the effects of the opiate. But remember, Narcan only works for about 20 minutes. After that, it's going to kind of, the half-life is gone and the opiate that they're using is going to start hitting those receptors again. We've been finding out that some of the stuff that these people are taking nowadays, the 2 milligrams that are in your protocol to give, really is not working. It's sometimes taking up to 6 to 10 milligrams of Narcan to be able to go ahead and reverse the opiate. One thing we remember though is that even if someone says they've overdosed on a narcotic or an opiate, we only use it if the patient is respiratory depressed. The Narcan isn't going to help these people. You got someone who may be unresponsive, pinpoint pupils, but they're breathing maybe 10 times a minute. Their pulse ox is 94, 93, somewhere right around there. They don't need the Narcan. They're fine just like they are right now. Continue to monitor them, watch them. If their respirations do drop down, then yeah, fine, go with the Narcan. But all the Narcan is going to do is just increase the respiratory rate and then wake them up, piss them off, and then you've got another set of problems on your hand. But if you can keep them just so their breathing is effective, that's really the whole purpose of the Narcan. Benzodiazepines, overdoses, it is Romazicon that is the antidote for it. I've always had a lot of people over the years say, why don't we carry Romazicon? We carry Narcan as an antidote, why don't we carry this? And a lot of people, we use the Versed Valiums to stop seizures, which are usually side effects of some of these other medications. The problem is that if they start seizing and we go ahead and we use the Valium or Versed, if we turn around and we give them the Romazicon, we can't use the Versed or the Valium anymore to stop any seizures if they start having it again. All right, so amphetamines. This is, like I said before, a stimulant, but amphetamines do have long-term effects on people. A lot of times it can be psychosis, jitters, weight loss. You can end up with skin abscesses. Involuntary muscle spasms are also very common. And then it depends on how they're going ahead and administering it to themselves. They may have track marks, and that's a lot of times how they get the skin abscess. Here is a picture of meth mouth.
Shocking drug abuse transformations. Amy Thompson. It is a jarring contrast to see pictures of Scottish teenager Amy Thompson before and after that fateful June night when she incurred brain damage upon taking an ecstasy pill. Beforehand, the glamorized 16-year-old looked flashy, well-dressed, and well, like your typical fashion-oriented teenager. Now, a video recently posted to Facebook shows a wheelchair-bound and pallid-looking Amy unable to move her arms while heavily slurring her speech. She was reportedly admitted to a Glasgow hospital after taking a crystal capsule of MDMA at a house party, at which time she was put into a medically induced coma for several weeks. Adora. This rapid 5-year regression in Adora from age 48 to 53 demonstrates the impact of what is known as meth mouth. Here, the meth addiction has brought on a dramatic level of decay and grinding, leading to a rather grotesque loss of teeth and a woman who appears to have aged far more than just 5 years. The galling effects of the drugs have also taken their toll on her unkempt, greasy hair, her stained, ashen skin, and through the bruising, scratch marks, and skin damage that can be seen all across the left side of her face and along her forehead. Female, 25. The presence of a hideous, widespread rash of red bumps across this woman's face points to what is likely an addiction to an opiate like Oxycontin or heroin. While she otherwise looks, for the most part, like a normal 20-something female, the red bumps highlight the multifaceted effects the drug can have. If you can look past her irritated skin, you will notice that her previously full, fleshy face has grown gaunt and narrow. Her stringy, greasy hair also suggests a lack of proper emphasis on normal hygiene. Male, 25. Given the reddened flesh and burn-like skin tone of this meth addict, it seems reasonable to assume that drug abuse has left its mark through sores and scarring. It is common for meth users to hallucinate while on the drug, with the sensory feeling of bugs under the skin being particularly typical. Perhaps then this young man incurred a brought-on self-mutilation by his obsessive scratching while on meth. Meth mouth is also clearly visible here, with swelling and redness circling his mouth and his teeth becoming increasingly yellow. Female, 43. It's unknown what circumstances occurred that led to this woman ultimately getting that creepy glass eye, but chances are you probably don't want to know that story. Plus, there is plenty else to focus on to highlight the extent of her addiction, what with a sunken chest that showcases her collarbone, and some pronounced wrinkles that make her after picture look far older than the 10 years that separated her from her before picture. Her face also reveals some pockmarks and a somewhat mangled forehead. But let's be honest, it's the glass eye, one that clearly wasn't there 10 years earlier, that stands out here. We hope this video...
Yeah, meth can do a whole lot of things. I mean, you think about what meth is really made of. Yes, the pseudoephedrine from like Sudafed and some of the other medications out there, but carb cleaner, diesel fuel, gasoline, you know, different oils, and they're putting that into their mouth. The other thing too with these people, they clench and they grind their teeth, which is one of the reasons why they end up with a meth mouth. But yeah, it does a whole lot of things to the body. One of the big things is the damage to the liver and the kidney. And most of the time this is because they don't eat. They lose a lot of weight, they end up with skin which not only ages very quickly, but it ends up with pock marks or abscesses. Their heart becomes very erratic, high blood pressure, and they're doing damage to their vessels. And let alone with their brain, they see a lot of times these people will have bleeds in the brain. If you're dealing with someone who is high on meth, you have to kind of treat them with kid gloves for the most part. You want to obviously keep your safety, maintain a good distance, but avoid fast movements. Try and stay as calm as you can. Keep your voice at even levels. Keep them talking. That's pretty easy to do because a lot of them won't shut up because you're going with them. But just be very careful you don't make sudden movements. You take a look here at the picture. Illinois has about 673 known meth labs. Indiana being the highest one with almost 1,800 meth labs. How do you recognize a meth lab house? Well, a lot of times the police officers will see comings and goings in these facilities or these homes at all hours. You might have some type of distinct odor that will go ahead and alert you. The big thing with meth labs though, if you actually make them in the house, you have to be very careful. They usually have different traps set up inside. And it's not just homes, it's motels or hotels. People will make meth labs or portable meth labs in the back of their pickup trucks, and they'll drive up and down the highways and dispose of their equipment or chemicals as they're driving. But if you do encounter a house that you believe is a meth house, the best thing is to go ahead and back out. Back out slowly, try not to touch anything, and then make sure that you alert your hazmat team to come in and take care of it. Barbiturates, as I said before, these are kind of a depressants and downers. Two different types. You've got your benzos and your barbiturates, which are going to be kind of like a sedative or a relaxant for you. People will take these if they have high levels of anxiety, they feel like they can't cope or deal with life, they're always on edge. But we see with the barbiturates that we have a decrease in blood flow to the kidneys, which then in turn, the kidneys are supposed to be filtering all the toxins out. We see these toxins start to build up in the system. These patients become metabolically acidotic. We also see cerebral spinal fluid pressures. They will go ahead and start to decrease. Myocardial contractility, where you'll have a decrease in cardiac output. Hallucinogenics, a lot of different types, a lot of different names. Over the years, people are using all sorts of things. And I actually do a lecture, it's called How to Get High Out of Your Own Kitchen Cabinet. I've taken it on a couple of national EMS circuits and provided the lectures. But it's interesting to find things in your own home that people are actually getting very high, and most likely it's the hallucinogenics. You know, we know LSD and PCP, but you probably want one of the best hallucinogenic highs, use nutmeg. Nutmeg, if you buy the the real nutmeg, the fresh nutmeg, and you grate it up. You can go online, the internet, it'll tell you exactly how many kilograms or how many teaspoons you need based on your weight, and you can take it. Now they say if you can get through the first 4 hours with it, which is miserable, vomiting, diarrhea, a lot of pain, the next 48 hours after that they say are absolutely wonderful, and it gives you this out-of-body experience, this euphoric type experience. But that's what you're going to see a lot of times with the hallucinations. Marijuana, you know, I don't think marijuana will ever go away, but no one has ever died from a marijuana overdose. There has not been one documented case in all of the years. We have legalized marijuana for medical purposes. Some states have just legalized it in general. But marijuana still comes with some type of consequences. Mainly memory consequences. They have short-term memory loss. They have, you know, their whole demeanor kind of changes. Those they don't really care a whole lot about. They have their coordination problems. Basic functions that the brainstem provides, they're not able to go ahead. They're not able to learn as well as what they used to. Now, marijuana is probably the most abused drug in the United States as of this time. One of the big questions we ask about is, since marijuana is legal here in Illinois for medical purposes, there's 17 different disease processes that people can be prescribed marijuana. You guys are firefighters and paramedics. Shoulders, knees, backs, they go. Chronic pain starts to set in. What is your thought on someone who maybe gets off shift, they go home, they have medical marijuana as a prescription, they go ahead and they partake, and then a day or two later they're back on the rig? No problem, huh? It's interesting because this has been a big topic of controversy throughout the whole United States as far as EMS, police officers, fire, going ahead and being at home on their own time, using the prescription marijuana, which actually THC is a little bit higher dose than it is on regular marijuana, and then being able to go ahead and get in a rig the next day. We don't have a test that can say, well, they smoked the joint, you know, 4 days ago or 2 days ago or, you know, 2 hours ago before they came. And those that take marijuana and get in a car and drive, maybe in an accident, are still cited for operating while under the influence. So if that would happen to an EMS personnel, are they able to make the decisions? Firefighters, are they able to make the correct decisions that may be needed in their job to perform it effectively? So yeah, we're one of those things to take a look at. A lot of different routes for marijuana. They can smoke it, they can eat it. But it does give a person a sense of different perception, if you will. Distorts perception, memory impairments. They can't solve problems like they should. And those that are long-term users and use on a daily basis will have those types of issues, which again, it kind of plays back to you guys are supposed to be solving problems on a daily basis. And how can you do that if you've been smoking marijuana? There is no antidote for marijuana, except for hot flaming Cheetos, I was told. So you've got someone who is stoned on marijuana, not much you're going to do with them. You're going to treat any signs and symptoms that you may see.
Lysergic acid diethylamide, or simply LSD, is a non-toxic, non-addictive psychedelic drug of the ergoline family. It was first synthesized by Albert Hofmann in 1938 from ergot, a grain fungus that grows on rye. What many people don't know is that LSD can also be synthesized from the seeds of the common garden flowers, morning glory and Hawaiian baby wood rose. The seeds contain over 10 different ergoline alkaloids, most notably ergine. Ergine is also known as LSA. These common, legal seeds have been used in shamanic rituals by Latin Americans for centuries. LSD works by mimicking serotonin and binding to the same receptor sites in the brain. LSD has a higher affinity for the 5-HT receptors than serotonin. This means the presence of LSD takes priority and prevents serotonin from sending neural messages. This process is what scientists believe caused the visual hallucinations and bodily effects, although the precise mechanism of action is currently unknown. This means scientists really don't know how LSD works exactly. UK researchers used functional magnetic resonance imaging to study the live brain activity of 30 hallucinogen users. They found the brain regions that are responsible for constraining consciousness are turned off, giving birth to a free flow of thought. The psychedelic used for the study was psilocybin mushrooms, which is a tryptamine. LSD is also in the tryptamine family and is believed to produce similar results. LSD is non-toxic and non-addictive. The median lethal dose, where 50% of users die for humans, has never been reached. This means no one has ever died directly as a result of consuming LSD. The LD50 is predicted to be roughly 12,000 micrograms. This means you'd have to consume over 120 standard doses to reach this level, although there are reports of users consuming over 400 doses and surviving. It is important to note that you build an immediate tolerance to LSD. If you were to take the same dose 3 days in a row, by day 3 it would have little to no effect on you. The danger with taking LSD comes from buying it off street dealers who are selling more harmful substances in disguise. LSD has been illegal since the 1960s. This put a damper on scientists' ability to continue their research into it. However, new research of its potential beneficial effects has finally sparked. This is being done by an organization called MAPS. With new research and an open-minded society, we may see this substance make a valiant return to more humans worldwide. Many famous people have warranted their success to LSD. Steve Jobs, the creator of Apple, has said it was one of the 3 most important experiences in his entire life. It's doubtful Apple computers would have came to fruition if it wasn't for his exploration into psychedelics. And in the scientific community, Francis Crick, the man who discovered the DNA helix, did so while tripping on LSD. Even Bob Wilson, who co-founded Alcoholics Anonymous, was greatly moved by his LSD experiences. He initially wanted to include it in the 12-step system as an aid to help recovering alcoholics kick the habit. Something tells me there is a treasure trove of knowledge to be gained exploring this substance, but only time will tell.
I don't think that was for against LSD. But yeah, LSD, they do say that people that experience it, their mind opens, all sorts of new thoughts come around. A lot of different ways to take it. Most of it's oral via tablets, capsules, liquid on little square pieces of paper, or even into sugar cubes. Trips can last approximately 12 hours. Some people have very good trips, some people have very bad. And you guys are called when the people are having the very bad trips. And sometimes it can be very difficult to go ahead and control them. Some of you guys that have been around long enough, when we used to use leather restraints on patients, have literally seen people break leather restraints from being on PCP or LSD. But some of the things, body temperature is going to be one of the big areas that we need to be concerned about. The metabolism within the body, the increased heart rate and blood pressures. You know, and this kind of goes back to the patients that are suffering from excited delirium. It's really important that if you're dealing with patients or have quite a few that you see excited delirium, is that you work with your police officers as a joint venture to take these patients down. You're going to need to use your chemical restraints. The process with these people with excited delirium is they don't necessarily feel pain. And the reason for that is that the medication that they're on, their metabolism increases. They have this superhuman strength because they don't feel pain. If you or I were involved in a fight or an argument, or we were restrained and people were pulling at us, we would stop. Our body says, hey, you're in pain, stop what you're doing. And we listen most of the time. Sure, when we've got adrenaline flowing, we can have things that happen even a little bit more. But with these patients, they don't feel pain, so they can literally break restraints. And in the process, they're breaking their bones along with it. Because their metabolism is so high, their body temperatures elevate also. And we need to work on cooling them down. They will go into cardiac arrest if we're not able to do so, because of the fact that with their body temperatures and the adrenaline and all the other chemicals flowing through their system. So the police officers, they need to take them down. You have to be ready right there with your Versed or Valium, whichever chemical restraint that you're going to be able to use. And as soon as they're taken down, give it to them. That will reduce the activity that their body, the metabolism, and therefore start cooling them down and reduce a lot of the electrolyte imbalances within the body. There is no antidotes for LSD. We just have to let them run its course for their trip and let them go. We use our standard medical precautions and treat any signs and symptoms that may arise. If they're hypertensive, we'll use medications to lower the blood pressure. If they are hyperthermic, we'll start cooling the body down. Ecstasy, MDMA, those types again, different medications. Some of them known as the other medications like roofies, date rape drugs. Again, we have to cool their bodies down. We see their bodies with hyperthermia. They end up having increased physical energy. They love the other human contact that they get with this. You'll see a lot of them, if you're seeing them in the clubs, they're going to go ahead and usually have some type of lollipop or something that they're sucking on, because otherwise their teeth will start to grind. They're extremely dehydrated, so they're going to need IVs. They drink a lot of water. Very rarely do they, in rave clubs, do they go ahead and mix this with alcohol, because it does what it needs to do without it. But our biggest thing is going to be temperature regulation for them. We don't have an antidote, so it's going to be basically letting it run its course and treating any signs and symptoms that we see come up with these patients. Reduce any stimulation, excess lights or flashing lights or any excess noise. Try and keep as calm a situation as you can. That will reduce the aggressiveness, the aggressive behavior in your patients. Also, we want to make sure that we do have these patients on monitors. Because of the electrolyte imbalances within their body, it's not uncommon for them to have some type of arrhythmias. Prescription drug use, this is hitting the nation all over, almost to the point where the FDA and federal governments are asking the FDA to stop selling opiate-type narcotics, or not selling them, but prescribing opiates and narcotics to patients for pain management. They feel there are other things other than opiates that can be used for pain management, because so many people are being prescribed this, and now they're getting their hands on it, they're selling it, people are stealing it. For years and years, we used to have morphine on our rigs, and we'd have to ask permission to be able to give it, because no one could understand. It said 2 milligrams of morphine was going to cause them to become an addict. And now, or over the years, it was like everybody has a right to be pain-free. Give them fentanyl, give them morphine. Now we're retracting it all. We don't want to be doing this as much just because of the risk of high abuse that we see. Prescription drugs, if you take a look at it, interesting, I'm surprised, like the Chicago only has a 40% increase, whereas down in some of these other areas, they have almost 805% increase in prescription drugs. Different supplements and steroids that people are taking. Now, yes, we still have our people that are going to go ahead and use the steroids, and between males and females, it's interesting, it's kind of like the opposite effect. Males are going to have breast growth, development, and women, you're going to have a decrease in breast size. Both will have issues with sexual dysfunction, their skin, muscle mass, hair are some of the things. Male pattern baldness, women's hair will get a little bit thinner. But, when these people end up aging, you can almost think what they're going to look like.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Bath salts, I haven't really seen too much in the news or anything about bath salts anymore. I don't know if it was a passing fad and no longer is around. I'm sure it's still there. But with these designer drugs, interesting enough, the FDA has a really hard time staying in front of them. They'll go ahead and they say, okay, here, I've got bath salts. They'll go ahead and test it. They have a chemical composition. So they'll say this chemical composition is now illegal. So the manufacturer changes one little composition and it still does exactly the same thing, but now that is back to being legal again because it's just tweaking it a little bit. So the FDA cannot keep up with all these different designer drugs that people are manufacturing. A lot of the bath salts will have the same effect as amphetamines and cocaine, increases, it's a stimulant. Where they get away with a lot of these designer drugs as being able to sell them pretty much outright is they put on the label, not for human consumption. So if that's on there, most humans should not eat it, and then they would be safe. But that's how they're avoiding any FDA laws. They can be taken orally, snorted, smoked, injected, swallowed, anything of a way to get it in. Most commonly, they're going to have hallucinogenic effects, palpitations, maybe some little bit of paranoia behavior, but liver failure. The liver is not going to be able to filter out the toxins. So they become metabolically acidotic, and they have an increased tolerance for pain. Again, no antidote either. We just need to make sure that we are treating the signs and symptoms. I keep stressing, you know, it's always funny when you sit there and you chase symptoms with different medications. You know, we've got someone who overdoses on drugs or having very bad behavior or bizarre behavior. What do we turn around and do? We use chemical restraints and another type of drug to counteract the drugs that are being taken. Yeah, with this one, you're probably going to need to sedate them a little bit. Make sure you have the cardiac monitor on them.
Want some?
Don't do it, not do that, my son. Why are you doing that right? I'll keep going.
Good friends, we keep filming. Yeah, different types of inhalants. The duster, that was always a big one. A lot of them would go ahead and put the straw. One of the police officers down in Texas, he was very big into promoting how bad drugs were. Found his son dead downstairs in his office because with the straw still in his mouth. We see this very often. It's not just that, but it's paints, it's markers, it's paper, liquid paper, glues, anything that they can go ahead and inhale. What this does is it blocks the ability for gas exchange to occur, and they become hypoxic. Now, generally, when we see someone hypoxic, they have altered mental status. But with these chemicals, it's giving them a euphoric. Take Ready-Whip, for example. You go ahead and you purchase Ready-Whip at the store, you leave the can upright and you put the nozzle, you've got nitrous coming right at you. And it's right there ready for anybody to go ahead and purchase. So, yeah, it's going to cause some dizziness, maybe some giddy feelings. But this is absorbed into the blood and ultimately can cause extreme central nervous system changes. They end up becoming metabolically acidotic and very low potassium. Now, when a patient's potassium gets to be less than 3.0, it's not uncommon for them to go into cardiac arrest, such as VFib. Some of the other things, too, with these patients, depending on how much of the chemical they've inhaled and how they've done it, they may be required to be deconned. Big thing for you guys is just giving them high flow oxygen. What you're trying to do is the affinity to these chemicals to attach to the hemoglobin is very high. And so we give the oxygen as a way to try and force some of those chemicals off the hemoglobin and oxygen to be able to take over. Farm parties, skittle parties, whatever you want to call them, teenagers will go ahead and they'll take whatever they can find out of mom and dad's medicine cabinet. And they throw it in a bowl, and they all just start taking handfuls and taking them, and no one knows what they're taking. This provides a big problem for you when you get there, because you're like, all right, what did your friend take? Well, I don't know, because they really don't know. They don't know if it was a beta blocker, if it was Lasix, some type of diuretic, if it was an antidepressant. A lot of different drugs out there that if they are taken too much can cause some serious problems. With these patients, it comes to the point where we hope that a lot of them cause extreme irritability to the stomach and they start vomiting. But a lot of these patients are going to need some type of gastric lavage or activated charcoal, which we don't do anymore, just because the risk of aspiration is so high. Oops.
Alcohol's effects on the brain are quite complex, so just about any substance that people experience some kind of pleasure from tend to affect the brain centers that are involved in reward and control. And then over time with the addiction, the brain gets used to having that external stimulant there, and what ends up happening is some of those dopamine receptors kind of get used to having that, and they end up either becoming less sensitive or less productive of dopamine, so that when you stop, your brain's not really ready for that, and that's sort of oversimplifies, but it's a part of what is involved with withdrawal. But alcohol has effects in lots of different areas of the brain, not just that sort of reward area, but it's also involved in a range of other neurotransmitters beyond dopamine. So, things like glutamate and GABA and other parts of the brain, the hippocampus, which is involved in memory, the cerebellum, which is the back part of your brain that's involved in motor coordination. And likewise, when someone is alcohol dependent, it is one of the most destructive drugs to various parts of your body and different organ systems. From the top down, chronic alcohol dependence can have significant effects on cognitive functioning, memory, motor coordination, all of which is controlled up in the brain. You can have esophageal problems down into the stomach, pancreas, liver, because the liver is the organ that kind of clears a lot of the toxic things out of our body. When that starts shutting down, it not only is not able to really process alcohol and its toxic byproducts well, but there are other things that it just starts losing functioning. And when that starts going, it's a very serious physical problem. Worst case scenarios can be things like alcohol-related dementia or delirium, which are serious brain problems, or cirrhosis would be another really major problem. These are the things that people become extremely ill and need to go into a nursing home, or people just die from.
Yeah, we have the effects of alcohol. Now, the CDC just came out with that if you have more than 5 drinks in 1 week, you are a heavy drinker and possibly have a problem. And people are looking and say, well, that's not even 1 a day. That's a nightly night for you, 5? Yeah, but that's the CDC's new guidelines. If you drink more than 5, you are considered to be a heavy drinker. The body depends on the alcohol, and like it said, it decreases the amount of dopamine that is actually made in the brain. So when people then don't drink, they do go through those withdrawals, and it brings them down even lower. Even though alcohol is a depressant, a lot of people say it's this pick-me-up. It can cause a lot of different problems. Think about in the wintertime when you're outside and you're doing outdoor sports, and you have your little flask of whatever you drink, and you think, oh, my liquid antifreeze. You go ahead and you indulge in some of that. It's actually causing more problems because alcohol is a diuretic. And therefore, you end up with cold diaphoresis from having too much alcohol in the cold, which in turn causes hypothermia in your body. But big issues with the liver damage if you are a heavy user. Body can't filter out toxins. It used to be, many years ago with EMS, that if you found someone unconscious for unknown reasons, they automatically got 2 milligrams of Narcan, they got an AMPA D50, and they got 100 milligrams of thiamine. The thiamine then was used because they thought alcoholics were undernourished, which we know a lot of times they are, but the thiamine itself would turn and help out that glucose be able to be used by the cells. We've learned better since then. We don't use thiamine as much, even though hospitals will still go ahead and give it. But we have learned now to assess our patients and try and figure out what is going on. Energy drinks still remain a problem. Actually, over a couple months ago, I think I saw in the paper here in Chicago that a teenager had died from having too many of these in the course of a 24-hour period. These kids will go ahead and they drink them like water, and they'll have 4, 5, 6 of them. And then they start having heart palpitations and chest pain, and they don't understand what's going on, maybe even a headache. And so automatically they're calling you. people, they'll look at these and they say, well, it's no different than having 3 cups of coffee or 4 cups of coffee, the amount of caffeine. But it's not just the caffeine in there that becomes the problem. It's all the other vitamins, quote unquote, that do the same thing, increase your body stimulation. Nausea and vomiting, tremors, insomnia, they can't sleep. Even though they have them in the morning, at night, they still have problems.
As for the AAA in 21 and 23, sub 23 and 21, 1881 over the 52 apartment for the following paragraph. That is the AAA in 21 and 23, sub 23 and 21, 1881 Oak, 1881 Oak, 52 apartment for the following paragraph. For page 31 or 958.
Ultimately, what these drinks are also going to do is cause dehydration, because again, they do have some diuretic properties. Caffeine is a diuretic, and they keep drinking these thinking they're getting fluids when they're really, truly not.
And this flight is going to go on that, put in 21 days of service.
We'll take a break. How did you say everybody?
That is the EMS assignment. Ambulance 22, engine 22, 1900 Sherman, apartment 510. For the medical alert activation. EMS assignment, ambulance 22, engine 22, 1900 Sherman, apartment 510 for the line alert activation. For pages 34, 957.
Coffee time. Union coffee break.
You're very cool.
I was going to say, are you really cold?
Frozen. Absolutely frozen.
Me too.
The only ones left.
Yeah, I'm taking a break.
Oak, in Japan, we have a residential high-rise showing that the activation or evacuation. First, just come check it out.
Yeah. Where's the sole survivors?
Sid.